Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share my full review, the digitally digested segment, for the Sigma FP. Now, for those of you already familiar with this small beast, you already know what it's all about. We're looking at the smallest full-frame interchangeable lens camera ever made that is, interestingly enough, a hybrid, but more importantly, a cinema camera first. So if you're thinking about, red cameras, black magic, this is right in there. It gives you the ability to capture 12-bit raw DNG video. Of course, that video will have to be captured via the Type-C port to an NVMe drive, like the Sabrent 1 terabyte that I have here. Now, Sigma does specifically point to using Samsung T5 drives. I do have those in-house. I tested it with that as well. Sigma specifically says to use it with those, and I think it's because as far as compatibility goes, that is really what Sigma has tested on, and I understand why. Those have been around for a while. These Sabrent Nano drives, not as long. But this does function. Whether or not it's going to work for you is really going to be a matter of budget and, well, the performance you get. Now, for the most part, the Sabrent drive has worked consistently for me. There have been a few occasions, though, where the Sigma FP did not recognize it. So I just want to make you aware of that. Go ahead and power that on. It was sleeping. So you can see right now it says no media, but now it just registered, and that 1 terabyte card is showing 47 minutes. Battery life, by the way, on here is solid, especially considering the cost of the batteries, the profile of the batteries, and the fact that, again, this is such a small camera. Now, for those of you who feel this is really a hybrid, look, I'm not going to argue it's not a hybrid. It does take some gorgeous stills if in the right hands, but it is designed to be a cinema camera first. I mean, the entire design of the product screams that it's aimed at being a cinema camera. The fact that it captures raw 12-bit video coming out of its Type-C port, again, reminds you this is a cinema camera. So, while it can't do things like record 4K at 60 frames per second, I think that really isn't necessarily the goal of people looking to shoot with a cinema camera. It's more about the ability to get raw video, and this does an incredible job of delivering that. And the novelty of such a small form factor, for those of you that are wondering, is that this can go places traditional cinema cameras cannot. And I mentioned this in my first update on this because that's exactly what this is all about. So whether you're putting it on a gimbal, whether you want to do something aerial related on a drone, this is going to give you flexibility that just doesn't exist with other cinema cameras. It's really that simple. And then the fact that it is a hybrid, the fact that it can take stills as well, is an added benefit. And that's how I look at it, because this is all about shooting manual. And that's not to say that there isn't an autofocus system on board, because there is. 49 points of contrast detection live on here. We have eye autofocus. If I just wake it back up, you'll see right now on the screen, eye autofocus and autofocus is enabled. But I still believe the majority of users are going to shoot and live in a manual focus world with this camera. And I stated it in my first update on this camera. The 45mm kit lens is phenomenal, but it's designed for this. Now, the mount on here is an L mount, so you really have a wide range of options when it comes to lenses. But in the event you want to shoot with a PL lens, Sigma does have an adapter. Now, this is not something I shared in the past, simply because I don't have any PL lenses to use with it. My only cinema lens that I have here is a Sony lens, which is a native E-mount lens. It's really the kit lens designed for their high-end video cameras for pro-grade work, but it still, doesn't fall into the class of what Sigma has designed this adapter for. And I'm sharing this now because this is my full review, and even though I'm not using it, anyone who's interested in this camera being a cinema camera should absolutely be looking at this, because this is going to allow you to take PL lenses and adapt them to L mount. So while this will bulk things up, it also is going to give you the ability to shoot with such a broad breadth of cinema lenses that anyone who's worried about the fact that it's an L mount, well, that concern is completely alleviated once this guy shows up. Now, this converter is expensive, over $600 US, but you have to remember what you're getting yourself into. And also, the price of admission on the FP is so low. I mean, you're talking about $17.99 for the body alone. Throw in the kit lens, you're at around $2,000. compare that to similar solutions that are also going to be far greater in terms of size and bulkiness, and more importantly, pricing. Yeah, Blackmagic, you can look at their pocket cameras and they will be competitive in terms of pricing, but Sigma's lineage in the business, their own lens lineup in general in terms of lenses designed for other manufacturers, and then the fact that you can fix any sort of compatibility if you want to move to PL mount lens options. The world is your oyster pretty much with this camera. So I feel like this camera has gotten, I don't want to say a bad rap, but it hasn't gotten the credit that it is due, especially with the latest firmware update. I mean, this thing can live stream, be used as a web camera. And I'm not saying that that's what anyone should ever buy this for, because it's an amazing piece of kit designed specifically to do one thing, which is be a hybrid, but a cinema camera first. So you already know 1 terabyte of NVMe storage is going to get you around 47 minutes of 12-bit DNG that you're going to want to drop into something like DaVinci Resolve. I mean, that's where you should be editing with this. If you decide to record to the single SD card slot that it has, you will be relegated to 8-bit. And that's something that reminds you that it is a hybrid, because if you don't want to keep this tethered, you can just shoot, 4K video. The quality will still be good, but it will not deliver the ultimate potential of what the FP is all about. And I mentioned in my update, I am not a previous Sigma body user. I didn't own a Quadro in the past. It took some time to get used to the menu system, but I had no problems with it. It's not that far of a deviation from what I'm basically born and bred on with Sony over the last decade. And I think Sigma has just done a really solid job on producing something that's well made, produces fantastic video quality, gives really quick access to controls. I mean, anyone who missed, again, the update, your mode, your color profile, your tone, your playback, it's all there. It's straightforward. You got one jog dial here. The menus are, again, they're not going to wow you. You cannot use the touchscreen for the menus. The touchscreen has limited functionality. That's something I'd like to see Sigma address in their revision of this. Hopefully we will see an FP2 or whatever Sigma would plan to call it. But the beauty here is that while it's limited, you do still have a touchscreen when it comes to touch to focus. So limited touchscreen functionality. In my update, I said there wasn't any, and that's because, well, frankly, I got used to with Sony saying they had touchscreen when the only feature Sony ever had was touch to focus or touch to actuate shutter. So very similar here. In terms of stabilization, there is electronic. We don't have in-body axis stabilization. That's something I'd like to see them introduce, but it's not something that Sigma needs to put inside of a camera like this. But again, really straightforward when it comes to the menu system. And yeah, you've got to go through some digging, but I don't think it's a big deal at all. It's fairly obvious. It provides all the features and capabilities that you would expect to be inside of a top-of-the-line cinema camera. But again, in the form factor of a travel rangefinder camera, granted no EVF, and at a price that is pretty much on par with traditional full-frame mirrorless interchangeable lens cameras. So what is there not to like about this? Well, as I've stated, this really isn't designed to be the every person, hybrid shooter. And some people have argued, oh, no, it is. It's not, okay? Watch Sigma's own marketing team, their own engineer. He will directly tell you this camera, I've watched the videos and so should you. This camera will thrive in the hands of a competent user. This camera will thrive in the hands of a user that understands it is a cinema camera. The fact that they gave us the bonus of being able to shoot stills is exactly that. It's a bonus. But while I can see someone using this to shoot stills, this isn't what I would recommend for it. This is really just an amazing cinema camera with a phenomenal kit lens, something you generally don't say about kit lenses, especially if you're a Sony user like myself. Love the on-off and the still to video dedicated switch button right there. If I flip over into still mode, you can now see it's telling me I have, of course, 9,999 stills with the 1 terabyte. That's at the 24 megapixel sensor. And, you can play with different elements of this. you want to shoot RAW, of course you can shoot RAW. I mean, this is a RAW video camera. Just remember that when you have that SD card in there, you're not going to take full advantage of this. So if you don't plan on getting yourself a Samsung T5, a cage so that you can mount it, as well as other accessories, I feel like you're not going to be able to take full potential of this camera. I'm not saying you can't come up with some do-it-yourself rigs, but the reason I asked Sigma to send the cage that you see on this camera right now was specifically so that I could mount an external monitor, because that's another thing. You know, this display with its limited touchscreen capabilities, a little over 3 inches, it's fine, there's nothing wrong with it. But if you're looking for more, the best accessory you can get is their Viewfinder. And this Viewfinder is expensive, but I challenge you to find something better than this, because when it's connected, the experience that it delivers is really very difficult to beat. I mean, this is a true cinematographer's viewfinder, a director's viewfinder, if you will. And I will give you an example of that right now. Go ahead and power it on, and I will bring it up to the camera as best I can so that you can actually get a look at what this does. I'll just get this all the way in there. And you can start to see inside, but let's see if I can get anything in focus. Bringing it in as close as I can, and without damaging my camera equipment, you can see it's picking up. Granted, things are not in focus like they should be, but you can see my hand there. Now, that wasn't the most scientific or best way of testing it, but what I can tell you is that when you're using this, it really does legitimately turn the display of the FP into a real viewfinder, no light leakage. Doesn't matter whether you're left or right eye dominant, this thing is worth every penny. And I'm just thoroughly impressed with what Sigma's done here. And it's not the first attempt at something like this. This style of viewfinder has been around in the past. But anyone who thinks that Sigma would have been better served by integrating an electronic viewfinder that could pop out on a camera like, for example, as I move this out of the way, my old RX1, I wholeheartedly disagree. Let me actually reverse the orientation. And that's what the Sigma FP reminds me of so much, is that if Sony took the RX1 full frame, of course fixed lens little monster, gave it 4K video capability, God forbid they also gave us actual RAW capture through a Type-C port like we get with the FP, I mean, that is what the FP, in my opinion, realizes completely. You know, in terms of autofocus system, look, Sigma could improve it. They don't need to, because again, this is meant to be a cinema camera. And when you look at cinema cameras, you do not buy them based on their automatic focus capabilities. You're buying them for basically everything other than that. It's the quality that they can output. It's the in-camera grading profiles that you can use. Because, you know, when you have 12-bit raw footage, I mean, the world is yours. You can do pretty much anything you want with that in post, in very much in the same way, yet not identical to what you can do with raw stills. So that's why when this camera came out, the first thought in my mind was, holy moly, Sigma took the concept of the RX1, made it a cinema camera, but still gave us the ability to shoot stills. This is a dream camera. And while it's not my dream camera, because it is really designed to be a cinema camera, and that's not something that I personally need as a content creator, I could see why it would be great to have for the channel for shooting myself on screen. It's going to give a look and feel that, yeah, you know, my A7R4 can shoot good footage. I have a lot of cameras that can do well, but none are going to produce what this little guy is ultimately capable of. So, overheating, not an issue. If you didn't notice, ventilation all around the body. You do have HDMI out here. We have weather sealing. You have your mic jack. You have the ability to thread accessories natively. And then if you do throw a cage on here, I mean, whatever you want to attach to it, microphones, monitors, additional battery systems, if you get a dummy battery for it, you can do it. It really is ready to be rigged up. And, you know, that's when people will say, well, that defeats the purpose. You've now turned the world's smallest full-frame cinema camera, of course it's mirrorless interchangeable lens, and based around the L mount, into a bulky monster. Well, but the beauty is you don't have to do that. The beauty is that you have that flexibility, that you can leave this without a cage and just shoot it the way you want, or you can rig it out to your heart's content. When you start with something that's really large, you can't undo that. And I think that's the beauty of Sigma's FP, the fact that it's modular, has so many proprietary accessories that some may complain are expensive, but ultimately give you the flexibility, as I keep stating over and over again, to turn this cinema camera into whatever you want it to be. And I can't tell you how many forums I've seen where people are really content with using this as their travel camera, which I was shocked. I mean, you wouldn't expect it, but guess what? People are shooting with this as a travel camera. And I get why, because what other cinema grade camera can you take traveling with you? I mean, I could see myself on the next generation of this, if Sigma does bring it, wanting something like this, because it, I think, ultimately could deliver the best of both worlds. If they slightly improve the autofocus for, schmucks like me, and then in addition to that, maintain the video quality, but bump up what's capturable to the SD card slot. Like if we can get to 10-bit, maybe not 12-bit, okay? But if we can get to 10-bit, like the A7S III is capable of, and the autofocus doesn't have to be as good as the A7S III, let's just get halfway there. This camera, all of a sudden, isn't just, appealing to the capable cinema shooters, it's appealing to everybody. And I don't think that hurts Sigma. I think that benefits them greatly. It still maintains the same properties of the go anywhere little magical mirrorless camera that it is. And it still provides features that generally make you jump into the cinema world rather than a form factor that lends itself to, the RX1 that I just pulled out. So I think Sigma's onto something. I think there's a reason this camera hasn't been heavily discounted, because there is nothing else like it on the market. I didn't end up comparing it to the A7S III because it's not a fair comparison. The A7S III is a phenomenal video camera, but it still can't do what this camera can. It still isn't as small as this camera, and it's not a true cinema camera. It's on the border of being one, but it is not something that, I'm not saying that people wouldn't pick it over this. Many will, some won't. But it's just designed more to be comfortable in anyone's hands, whereas the FP is designed to be comfortable in a pro's hands. That's my best way of putting it. And I don't think that's bad, but it does limit the saleability of the Sigma FP. So hopefully in the future, these are the upgrades I'd like to see. I would like to see the touchscreen improved. I want a full touchscreen if we can do that. It's not necessary. That would be nice. Okay. I'd also like to see a higher bitrate capturable to the SD card. We can still relegate 12-bit DNG to NVMe drives. I don't see anything wrong with that. That's par for the course anyway. The majority of cameras can't do anything other than record to NVMe drives for that sort of quality. I would like to see a beefed up autofocus system. I think that if we could get a few hundred points of contrast and maybe a hybrid system with phase, this is a whole nother beast altogether. And of course, you can always disable that. In addition to that, I think that if they can beef up the battery a little bit, but if that comes at the expense of making this too much larger, I wouldn't want them to do it. The EVF part, I'm not so concerned about. If they can just make an articulating screen, which I actually saw a video on YouTube of an end user modifying this camera, which I don't recommend doing, but he did an instructional video with no audio to remove this and actually make it articulate. If Sigma can make that happen, I think the argument for the EVF goes out the window. But of course, you still have the option of picking up one of these, which still gives you all of the control of the buttons that it occupies on the bottom of the deck of the camera, and gives you the ability to have a true viewfinder. And it's not electronic, which I have to say is even better, because optical viewfinders are hands down better than EVFs, even though we've come a long way in the electronic viewfinder world. The dial here is good to have. It's one of two dials you have access to. The ergonomics of this camera, that's another thing. But remember, the ergonomics are a result of its form factor. So that's another thing that if Sigma can address, it would be great. But I don't want them to really make this much larger. So if the ergonomics need to stay this way, then a cage like this that gives you, there's a small rig, a physical grip on the front, that really is all you need. So for me, if we can get 10-bit to an SD card, if we can make an articulating display with more touchscreen integration, if we can improve the autofocus system just a little bit, I think they have a camera that will ultimately appeal to professional cinematographers as well as the general public, all on the same day. And I think that that is the sort of camera that Sigma, if they make, will knock it out of the park. So while this is amazing, and I know so many of you praise it, and I understand why, I think they have the room, considering this is only Gen 1, that's the other amazing part, to really take this to the next level. And that's what the Sigma FP really excites or creates excitement for me personally, because I see the future of where they're going, and no one even expected this from Sigma. I mean, this is unlike their cameras from previous generations. This is going in a whole nother direction, and it just solidifies Sigma's reputation as being serious about quality hardware and essentially, pushing the envelope, breaking down boundaries that right now the rest of the DI business continues to maintain, Sony included, who usually pushes the envelope. But they have not made anything like this. No one has. So kudos to Sigma on this. It's an amazing camera. I love it. Wish I could keep it. That's not in the cards. It's got to go back. It's a review unit. All of the equipment that they sent over for review is headed back. And it's just been a great time with it. I can highly recommend this to you if you're in the market, again, for a cinema camera that's as small as possible and you understand what you're getting yourself into. As I stated, with the NVMe drives, Sabrent, I'm not going to say at your own risk, because I've seen issues with T5s as well. So it's really going to be hit or miss. In my opinion, I would own both, test, see how they work, because I've had dropouts on different days, and I've had them run for over an hour, roughly an hour each. I have a 2 terabyte drive as well that I've tested with this. So that's what it boils down to. Again, the beauty of this is cinema, 12-bit DNG, anywhere you want to take it. Your only limitation is battery life and your NVMe's capacity. But the files are tremendous, and you better be ready to work with DaVinci Resolve. That's really the end of the story. And if you want to take it to the next level, I highly recommend getting the Viewfinder. I mean, the LVF11 may be expensive, but I think it's worth every penny if your chief complaint about this camera is not having a Viewfinder. And if then your next complaint is, well, how large it makes the camera, it's still smaller than the majority of the competition. But to me, thinking about this dropped on a gimbal, especially the new gimbals from DJI with their new autofocus capability, those are the type of things that really start to become interesting. Unfortunately, I didn't have that to test this with, but had I, it would have just been an even more compelling overall experience, I think. And I do recommend this kit lens. If you already have a bunch of cinema lenses, I already told you, pick up the MC31. But if you don't, this is a great starting point, and who knows, you may have plenty of L glass, and well, then you don't need to think about an MC31 adapter for PL. But if you do, well, just be glad the PL adapter exists. That rounds it out. Solid overall performance. I think a very affordable price from a solid manufacturer with a good reputation. Everything here is made in Japan, folks, not the NVMe, but Sigma's hardware, not the small rig China metal cage. Sigma has just done a fantastic job, and I'm just really excited to see what comes in the future. And again, they are supporting it. That firmware 2.0 just took things up a level, and it is an intelligent camera that I hope just gets even more intelligent, better processing power in the what I am hopeful will be a second generation of the FP. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. Hit that like button, and as usual, please feel free to subscribe, and please stay safe. Later.